Welcome to Redesigning Life. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Gertrude Lyons, who just wrote this amazing book, Rewrite the Mother Code. Gertrude, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I cannot wait to dive deep into this book and our conversation. So thank you for being here.
Sabrina, it's a total blessing and honor. Thank you so much for having me.
For those of you listening, I was invited to launch Gertrude's book, this beautiful, very intimate dinner party of amazing women. And it was such a sacred setting because it was all of these women and we were having these conversations, much of which surrounded about your book, which we'll get to in a second. But what I realized is that there is such strength in women and the core of who we are, and that's what your book is about. So I want to start off with questions because I was reading this book, and thanks so much for not only gifting it to me, but you sent it to me again. You say that everyone is a mother, whether or not they have kids. And I have a lot of friends who don't have children. So how can someone really, I don't know, like begin to own the truth of that, even though they may not have children themselves? Because I have a lot of friends who feel motherly, but kind of abandon themselves because they're not a quote unquote mother.
Oh, gosh. Thanks for jumping right into that one because it's so core to what I believe and one of the, I don't know, like revolutionary, but not, but at the same time, universally true pieces that I want to highlight in the work that I did in writing that book and bringing it out there is that we all mother, we conceive, create, and give birth to, if we choose, children, but ideas and dreams and careers, relationships, pets, anything we're putting are caring, creative, nurturing, but also mama bear, destructive, the whole range of like mother energy into, we are mothering. But that the most important person we need to mother is ourselves.
Yes.
So those are kind of the two really key aspects of the message. And I I really want I really want it to be a unifying message because I think as women I don't know, it's just something we've done to ourselves. I'm not blaming patriarchy. I'm not, blaming, but in this kind of over masculine dominated value system that we're all a part of and adhering to, I think this is something that could really help break down some of those barriers if we really start owning this mother aspect of ourselves and then see that commonality amongst each other instead of becoming compartmentalized or, putting ourselves like, oh, you know, I'm this, I'm a mother of children. So now for some reason I'm going to judge women who don't make that choice, or I'm not, or I think I don't relate as much. All the things that like start to happen under that structure, I really want us to upend.
You've been doing this work a long time. So for those of you, like for the listeners that maybe aren't so familiar with your work, can you talk about the book, why you started it, but really how this all came about?
Yeah. Well, I always kind of laugh when I get that question because, well, it's my life's journey, right? Like how did it come about was, hitting certain inflection points where I kind of had some life experience that I could then reflect on. Then I could look and see and say, oh, I started to really, look kind of straight in the eye, like where did I mother myself? Where did I kind of stay connected to myself, whether that was through personal development, transformation, all of that. And where didn't I? And noticing that in my motherhood journey, because we did decide to have children, we had two daughters, that there were places in there I felt, pretty good about that. Like I led the family in, kind of consciousness raising, awareness, self-development until I didn't. And
Wait, what
I
do you mean
hit,
until you didn't?
yeah,
What did that look like?
yeah. So, you know, um, it was something that I was aware that I was doing, but I really not, I I didn't want to confront the fact that once I had these two little children, this rocking the boat, because, when you go on a personal growth journey, you confront things, pain comes up. It feels risky. Like, oh, if I keep going on this, I might really disrupt something in my relationship. And I had been willing to do that and take whatever, chances I was, but suddenly I had these two little ones, and that felt too scary to keep doing. And and it wasn't until I reflected on it later that I realized just how much I let go of myself.
In
And
in the sense of people pleasing?
yeah, people
Okay.
pleasing, putting my kids first, putting my relationship first, starting to put myself last, losing myself in my children, doing some of the things that they say you're supposed to and how to do motherhood right, like getting my kids in the right things and, doing this and kind of appeasing myself. We were doing it more consciously, I guess, but I had really lost myself in at this like juncture, right? And so when I looked back on it, I was like, wow, if it was this hard for me to stay focused on my development, my whether it was growing myself personally, spiritually, in relationship with my husband, whatever realm that was happening, I was a coach that I was coaching
Right.
other couples, families. I was in an environment where this should have felt safe.
Right,
And
you're like, if I'm
if
allowing this
I'm
BS to happen, what are people who aren't in this
who
space
aren't even,
doing?
of course. So it gave me so much empathy for just what a challenging job, or what I'm asking people to do is not easy because it wasn't easy for me. Now,
Yeah.
some women that I was coaching were able to like stay in it, and I got to see how ways that they flourished because of it. It, and yeah, there were some risky times and it was painful at times for them.
I
So yeah,
I get it,
go
and I
ahead.
think the night that we had met each other, I got emotional because I was telling the story of how, I was raised. Both my parents are from Cuba. Especially Latin women are raised really to put ourselves last.
Yes,
And it wasn't until I sort of flipped the script, but I have gotten a lot of judgment from other mothers of doing that. I judge myself first
mm,
and foremost. When
hmm
you just said like putting them in things they're supposed to be, the sports, the extracurricular, the arts, the this, the that, the right camp. And if I'm not doing it, I feel like I am abandoning her. And then I feel like I'm abandoning my inner child because she didn't get all those nice things. So it is a very complicated
it is.
relationship, which is why everybody needs this book. It's not easy, it's
It
complicated.
is. And I'm hoping the book, lends enough like compassion for what I'm proposing, as a possibility that, when we can raise our awareness, when we do follow our intuition, follow, as I, outline in the book, there's these codes just what we're talking about are what are the mother codes, this do it right, put yourself last, have children because that's the most important thing you could do. Like all of those are just wired in beliefs, that we're complying with. When we tune into ourselves and can really look and explore like, well, what are my values? What are my desires? How do I want to do this motherhood thing? And claim that. No, it's not easy, right? But I can look to that and say, all right, I'm willing to, because this matters to me in a way that I've been thoughtful about, a way that has meaning to me. It gives me strength to face the negativity, the judgment, you're what do you think you're doing? You're not doing it right. And we don't have to sit there and say like, well, and this isn't about saying, well, my way is the right way or the better way. No, it's just my way that feels
Is right
good
for me.
based on, this is discernment. I'm not talking about like, well, I'm just doing it my way because I don't want to do it the way my parents did it, right?
Right.
Like
Yes.
I think we all understand this is taking some work and a little thoughtfulness, but we can all go on that journey and armor ourselves with something that is like really just it's ours. Then we're just measuring ourselves against, and we're not even really measuring ourselves. we're reflecting on with ourselves. And if we're not meeting our desires, that's on us, but it isn't something we need to be ashamed of. It's just, well, I might need more skills. Wow, I said I wanted to live this way, but gosh, I might need to practice this or get coaching or support in it to actually live it. But
Yeah.
I, I'm going to try. I'm going to, like, I may not be able to do it now, but I love the growth mindset. Carol Dweck, her this three-letter word yet, right? Oh,
Yes.
I see you, Sabrina, doing that. So instead of judging you for following your intuitive sense and doing it differently, instead of judging you and like criticizing you, maybe I could be curious. Maybe I could say like, well, I'd kind of like to do that. I don't know how yet, right? But we add that yet. I don't know how to do that, or that looks really hard. Um, Yet, right?
Right.
So we throw that in there, and that opens up so many more possibilities than we're just all that judgment is just self-protection, right? In a culture that's trying to tell us that there's these impossible standards to try and meet.
And no, and yes, exactly. It's impossible. And just something as small as yesterday, I woke up and, it was the weekend and I spent a good 20 minutes in my bed. I got coffee, brought it back up. I journaled. I did my gratitude journal. And Olivia
Mm,
was awake and she was downstairs making herself a little breakfast. And a part of me felt guilty. I
yes.
should be down there making her breakfast. And I stopped and I allowed it to feel. And then I realized for the rest of the day, because I'd given myself that time to recalibrate my nervous system, I was
Mm-hmm.
more patient with her. I was more present with her.
Oh,
And it's those little wins that you
well,
just
it's a
have to go,
huge win.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
and
But okay,
and
take
I'm
me
fine to
back to
call it a
when,
little win, but I still want to like massively celebrate it because you just the fact that you hit that juncture and didn't just reflexively say like, I got to go be with her, because we'll do that and then we're abandoning ourselves,
I know.
right? We might be uncomfortable with ourselves, just giving ourselves that time. So it's like, I'm going to feel needed. I'm going to give myself, and like go, help her, like as
Right.
if,
And by the way, she was fine by herself. But so
of
wait,
course.
Gertrude, take me back to that point when you said that you saw that you were people pleasing and abandoning yourself, and you coach people in order to do this. So if someone's listening to this and they feel like they're losing themselves and their children, how can they begin the process of reclaiming themselves
Yeah.
in this fog?
Yeah. No, that's such a
And
great
how
question,
did that happen
Sabrina. And
for you? How
yeah,
did that happen for you too?
I'll say, first I'll say like the ideal, and I'm saying ideal because I wish somebody had noticed it in a caring sort of way, not, judgmental, like you've stopped growing. I think someone maybe even have said that to me. I wasn't in some ways also in in some respects the healthiest growth environment for certain reasons, right? It was a little harsh and like, like you got to be doing the hard stuff like all the time. So with compassion, saying like, you used to like really, and I think maybe some people, now that I think of it, a couple people may have even said it that way. Um, but I'm still going to say, listen to that. And if I could have at any moment, just like you did with that urge to go be with your daughter, um, had some curiosity about it for myself and found someone that I could really trust to talk about it with, like I, I, I don't want to admit this because one, I'm supposed to be the expert in doing it, for myself. I'm supposed to be walking the talk. I'm not to the level I know. I'm somehow making it look like I am, but I'm not. Right. And,
Thank you for acknowledging and being honest and transparent about that.
100%. Because there are the times I followed that intuitive sense, like, oh, this is off, or I need to question this more, or, there's something probably deeper going on here and I need to explore it. But I really just let the fear take over. So I'm going to say that for two reasons. One, anytime we can stop for a moment, be curious, self reflect, find somebody safe to talk to about like these this awareness. I don't know what to do with it. And, is this like help me get a reality check here of what's going on? Because I think there would have been some, I just know there would have been some really good stuff. And I'm still uncovering, some of the fear that I actually think, that I've worked on later in life. So that's what I want to say. Have compassion. Like the fact that I got to it 10 years later, 15 years later, I'm still like, yay. I would have liked to have been, happened in real time at the time. And I let myself have the feelings of regret and remorse, like, oh my gosh, like what could have happened for me, our family, if I had done it. And
Yeah.
just like, okay, but I didn't. And I can have compassion for that. But it also fueled me to do this work. Right. And
Right.
I'm like, this isn't going to go to waste. And, maybe that was the journey I was supposed to have. But the fact that I got there at some point, to acknowledge and not like keep it buried, right? I could have just been like, ooh, oops, like
Yeah. That's right.
we'll just kind of keep going here and pretend that didn't happen.
Because
So
we are also celebrated for it, right? So
yes.
on the outside, we are celebrated for abandoning ourselves for our children and family. And I see some of the moms at school that are there, all the time just volunteering. And everybody's like, go, you're amazing. And then I look at her and go, gosh, are you okay? Like, because we can't do it all. It's
Mm-mm.
actually impossible. So it is a tough, again, subject because we're celebrated for the same thing that's drowning us.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the catch, this like um unrelenting standards, that are put on us that I will say are again more masculine based. They're outcome based, they're performance based, like we're supposed to measure, ourselves by our children's success, or like, this like narrow model of like what fits the bill of like doing it right. And so we'll never feel like accomplished, or we'll always feel guilty because it's not the standards that would come from a more balanced feminine masculine standpoint, right? Because
Yes,
I'm all for the
absolutely.
like, have expectations, for our kids, and, kind of push them and, challenge them and let them, but also to have space for process, space to just not fill the whole summer or, every waking moment of their days with activities because we have to build their resume, right?
Exactly.
It's
Yesterday, Olivia was a whole day nonstop when we were going to bed, and I was talking to her, and she felt overwhelmed. And I said, you were just overstimulated today. It was a
mm,
lot. And I feel like everyone's nervous system, has a time for rest, but we are taught, like what you just said, soccer, volleyball, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. It's like, oh my goodness. Um, so thank you for sharing that. I also like, what does rewriting the mother code look like for someone who may have a very complicated relationship with their mother?
mm. Yeah, no, such a beautiful question, Sabrina, because, what I really want to kind of gentle people into it, and how I introduce like exploring this in the book is, you know, in a way asking people first to like make agreements that this isn't about blaming our parents. This isn't about, but it is about being honest and truthful about what our upbringings look like, or what we experienced, but rather than make it good or bad, or, kind of just go to the judging of it, to start off with, if we can reflect and look back, what did I like and what did I not like? Right. So there's something about declaring, or, assessing through like and dislike that takes away some of the good, bad, and judgment. And it doesn't mean you might not still have emotional stuff come up, and I invite to go beyond that like dislike into, all out healing from our relationships. But if we can start, I don't want people to feel like they have to, delve into every nook and cranny of the difficult relationship with their mother in order to create their own,
Right.
but some level of exploration, some level of truth telling about it. And you can keep it as surface as you want just to start having this experience of claiming, because that's something that has been written for so long that we're not allowed to have our desires, that we're either just supposed to recreate what our families did or do the opposite
Right.
versus tune into like what do I like, why do I, what do I value? What are my having women explore what their deeper desires are almost feels like it's a radical act, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's I just do what I'm supposed to do,
Yeah.
sort of thing. So, when you have these more complex relationships, understand, tread lightly, with it at first and know that you don't have to go super deep into it right away unless you choose to, and
Yeah.
still come up with and something that's really beautiful for yourself, like your mother code, right? Is what I'm steering, navigating people to creating a statement for themselves that has some of what they've declared or decided are the things that matter to them, that they value. And those aren't going to be, I'm keeping, concrete things out of it. Like it isn't, my mother code isn't to, you know, lose 10 pounds or, have a perfect body as I mother. It's, or, some assessment that's so concrete. It's more things like, oh, I'm a woman who allows and encourages emotional expression. I'm a woman who tells the truth. I'm a woman who values connection and engagement, lives to her full potential, has conscious present in the moment experiences, things like that, that then you can orient to in the choices that you make. And when you have those moments where like, I'm a terrible mother, like or
Yeah.
something. If I look and it's like, okay, well, how am I doing with this set of values that I declare matter to me, and
To
it
reframe it all.
to reframe it for yourself. Yeah. And be guided by that.
I think I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation that I have a lot of friends who
Hmm.
don't have children, really chose not to have children. How do you recommend if someone's listening, how do they explore and embody that mothering energy
Yeah.
if in their lives, if they've chosen that motherhood is not for them?
Yeah. So I like that question because it allows us to both look at and some of what we were talking about, right? There's mother can be a very charged word, right? From our own upbringings, from what we think that means, or we hear the word mother, and I'll have so many women say like, "Well, I'm not a mother," and um, so when I start introducing this, and I just have them share about their lives and what they're where they're using their energy, it's always super easy to make the parallels. Now, you might want to, talk to a woman who has had children to like really tune into the parallels, but I think that's actually intuitive wisdom that we know, right? That when we any if we have an idea and then we start putting that like writing a book for me if I hadn't had children and I wrote this book, it to me followed exactly the same path as having a child, right? I conceived of this idea. I'd been working on it, thought about it, but then you actually declare that you're gonna like start writing it and conceive, and then there's like different overlaps, but I
And it
literally
probably
swear
took just as
about
long.
the same, yeah, same amount of time, exactly, from start to finish for my first daughter, probably. But I even like during the writing of it gained like baby weight. I just called it I'm feeding for two. I'm feeding for two during this. Um, but it's just some of the emotions that come along with it. And then the vulnerability of like, when I launched the book of giving birth to it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like people are going to see this, they're going to judge me, they're going to have, just like we feel with our children, like, oh, I have to, it has to be, but to put it in the world and let it go, right?
Yeah.
And let it go have its own life. Like I can still nurture it and care for it. So when, I talk to women, they've either started businesses, led teams, are in a relationship with somebody that it might not be as condensed in a 9-month period that, or, created something artistically, anytime we've put something out in the world, we've cared for a pet, if you look at the whole trajectory of that journey, it's a parallel,
Yes, I actually have
and
never thought of that before. That there is, if you are working on a very personal project, it is the same sort of feelings and the same steps, and there is a
yeah.
mothering in that as well. So, and I think that's why this book is so powerful. It's not just about, it's way beyond being a mother of children.
Hmm.
It has, there's so many interwoven um relationships and parallels in our life that
Hmm.
also mimic those things. In a cult, you also talked about earlier, like in a culture that glorifies productivity, the
Mm.
very masculine. How do you learn the value of nurturing, the value of nesting, the
Yeah.
value of resting, the value of retreating when we are very much living in a masculine culture right now of go, 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 being an A-type
Yeah.
personality?
It's kind of like deciding to go on a adventurous quest, right? Like, going into new, like uncharted territory, kind of prepare for it, read about it. And I mean that, like, read about women who are doing this, like look, to someone like you, like see if there's role models that are doing anything like this, but then understand like, yeah, like it is going into the unknown in some way, but then if you're doing it intentionally, then when you have like that first experience, the first time I did a solo trip vacation, it was after my children were grown. I kept saying I wanted to do it. I never did it. I ventured out on my own for a couple days with no agenda, nothing, like just to be, with myself. And it was uncomfortable, but also wonderful, right? So we have to start like, and that was a big practice. Like we can start smaller than,
I think
taking off for a
I
couple
went on
days,
a
but
solo trip. To this day, some of my friends think I'm crazy that I went on vacation by myself. To me, I came up with some of my best ideas on that vacation. I made friends that I was out there. I was with them yesterday. That I
oh,
met them in Hawaii,
oh my gosh.
and I do believe. And Olivia was born, and I was a mother at the time, and I do believe it's those moments of putting yourself first that make you a much better mother, friend,
Yes.
sister, daughter, everything.
That's, I think, what you start to see, right? But you have to, you know, kind of build a repertoire, like, do it, notice that like, hey, that worked. Everybody didn't die.
Right? Like just
We
go on a
we
walk
want
by
to think we're
yourself.
so needed, right? No, they can't possibly survive without me because that's our identity now. So
Right.
God forbid they actually can do great without us. So, some of the beliefs, and that's another thing I'd say if you're thinking about, doing something that you've right initially might feel is selfish or self-mothering, like journal, what are your beliefs about it? What are the worst things that you think are going to happen if you do this, and what are the judgments you think people are going to throw your way because they're actually judgments you have of yourself, and kind of foretell what it is, and notice what those barriers are, and then take baby steps into it. Maybe it's a cup of tea for yourself, like out, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's deciding you know to do something creative or do some coaching for yourself, or do a sound healing. I don't know, I'm making up a
No,
bunch of
it's
different
true.
things,
It
but
could be as small as like having a cup of tea by yourself in the backyard to taking a walk by yourself. But I think a lot of women, and tell me if this is right, like with your clients, have you seen that sometimes when the empty nesting happens, There is this
Mm,
breakdown because you've been needed. And there's a house full of people, and then all of a sudden it stops, and
yeah.
you're like, what the F? Like, who am I now?
Yeah. No, it's real and it's really big, Sabrina, and I'm so glad you brought that one up because I've had friends, I've noticed even my own transition with it. I remember like thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I have the kind of career I have that can continue, beyond." But that being said, there's I think a way that we need to it doesn't mean for women if you are raising children, that you have to have a job outside the home or that so that when they leave, you have something else. It, but that you have created some something for yourself,
Yeah,
right? Some space for yourself, some awareness or noticing even if someone is doing, full-time mothering, what are what is the meaning of this for you? How are you learning and growing? Like, what is this? Don't yeah, when we go into it kind of just like, oh, this is what I'm doing, and then we end up suddenly at that end with, oh my gosh, like what do I do now?
right.
And if you haven't been working on your relationship, if you're in a relationship and you look at this guy and you're like, oh, it's just you now, huh? Who are you, stranger? Right? You face some stuff, and it
Yeah,
doesn't mean even if you did that you can't then like step back and say, all right, like this is this is a new phase. Like we have to step back, and that's kind of the time when I looked back and saw where I did and didn't you know bring the growth aspect. So I knew that was something missing that I wanted to bring back in.
yeah,
It was okay to do a fearless inventory, and people are like, oh, you shouldn't look back, it's just all water under the bridge. It's like, I think a healthy reflection to then spur on. So how do I want it to be going forward?
right.
I'm putting myself way back in the equation, and I'm really going to go full out for what I need. And it ruffled my husband's feathers. I think my daughters were far enough along where it wasn't like, what's going on with you, mom? And they were very supportive. Um, I don't know, I was in school while my daughter was still in high school, so I she may have some feelings about that. But anyway,
Get her
and
on the phone.
working. Yeah, exactly. We gotta have some truth telling here, which we have. So there's gonna be some reckoning. And I think that at any stage where things change, right? We get to
Yeah,
see like, oh, I saw where I didn't develop myself. Nobody will have done that perfectly either.
that's right.
Right.
You're
And
absolutely right.
what am I going to need? And because if you don't do that, then you're just hanging around waiting for grandchildren.
Right.
And
And then
I
you
know
lose
that
yourself
sounds judgmental.
again.
Exactly. And that can be a beautiful thing to be a part of, one of your children's children and in their life. But we want to do that more mindfully and kind of rewrite codes of what we think grandmother is supposed to be,
Yeah,
and be in relationship with our now adult son or daughter
right, right.
about what that dynamic is instead of making assumptions.
Also very
So,
complicated. But
hmm
how can partners sort of show up in this new paradigm of mothering that honors both strength and softness in the mothers that we'd love to be?
yeah. Well, I'm hoping, and that it gets in the hands of men as well, right? To just kind of to understand the complexity, and they can't have our experience, but they and we can show up in a way that invites them into the conversation.
Right.
Right. If we're just, nagging or judging them or, kind of telling them how they're not there for us, or that's not really much of an invitation. But if we can be clear on our needs and our wants with them, that can start educating them. When we can step into it fully, I have found, I mean, now that I'm more kind of back in tune with myself and following, you know, my bliss, so to speak. I don't know if I'd put it quite that way, but with writing this book and getting out there in the world, my I don't think my husband's ever adored me more,
Well, I
and
gotta tell you, that night that I saw you at dinner, you were glowing. It wasn't even like you were walking around, you were floating. And I'm like, who is this woman? She's such a badass. So yes, you have
so
found
sweet.
your new, level. You've unlocked a new level, I'm sure, in your life.
Again, I just want to say I don't, I'm going to have ups and downs, and there's
Of
been
course.
challenges, and I think that's just one other thing I want to say about all this is you don't do all this so then everything is easy and perfect. It never is,
It never,
and
well, it is, I feel the same way. I've done so much self-development work. I went to Hoffman. I've gone to therapy. I've gotten hit in the head with basil from some shaman in a garage in San Bernardino. I mean, I've tried it all. And I woke up today so happy, super grateful.
Mm,
But I'm sure next week I'm going to be like, F this, F you, F me. And that's okay. It's about using those tools over and over again to get yourself
mm,
back into the floating, like you look
exactly.
like the other
You
day. But
you made those big investments in yourself and mothered yourself in that way that now you have a toolkit, right?
yes.
That you can draw upon.
Oh,
Yeah,
I have
that's so
toolkit. I have a
beautiful.
garage full of
I
tools.
know. We just
I
have to remember to use them.
It's funny, and that's another story, but it's funny when you're really in the depth of like either anxiety or depression that even though you know the tools, you don't want to use them.
Mm,
That is actually the key to success is even when you don't want to, it's still using them regardless because they
yeah.
always work.
Here, here.
But for someone
Okay.
who has listened to this, like who is this book for? Who did you write this book for?
Um, I would always run into this challenge, when a publisher or like when I was starting to write this book, who's this book for? Because it was so hard for me to ever say it's for this woman, right? Because I would say overall, I did write it for all women. I wanted aspects of us to be able to like see ourselves and see ourselves in this mother energy space collectively, right? I feel like I wrote it for the collective and for us to have collective healing, for us to really have an opening to true sisterhood and break out of the paradigms that have kept us judging and separate from each other and bring together this powerful force to help heal the world.
Yes.
Like I did write it for that, and then at the same time it does tend to but it's like, okay, and my experience was around raising children, and my story does revolve around, you know, conception and my whole journey and raising children. So it's very easy, like probably the easiest person you could give it to is a potential new mom, a pregnant woman, someone thinking about having a child, because that's like so clear and obvious. But every time I'm out and about with this book, like I have so many people and, so many women that have made a myriad of choices in mothering that the book has spoken to. And that's really making my heart sing, right? Because,
I just even how I met you and bringing those women together. It's exactly what you said. There's such power in the connection for women and recreating this connection because I feel like for the last few decades we've been torn apart. Before you described a moment in Nepal where you received a shamanic blessing. Do you
mm-hmm.
obviously that it
Yes.
catalyzed the next chapter? That mystic experience shifted you completely and your identity not only as a woman but as a mother. Can you, because I'm very woo woo in a sense, like can you tell people like what happened that day and how that changed you?
Yeah, no, yeah. So the Nepal experience um, happened like I had gotten two master's degrees, I was done with school. I was just starting to have these realizations of reflecting and kind of looking, where my mothering journey had taken me. So I was really like on that precipice of facing that, that truth. That truth hadn't fully come out yet, but something was brewing, for me. Um, and we met with this just beautiful Nepalese woman, shaman, and I sadly don't remember her name. These things like just kind of happen, and I'd like to like name her, but I don't remember her name. And she spoke, and we met with her, and then we had the opportunity to kind of sit with her, and I was near her, and I was able to like. I can't remember even exactly how it happened. If we all got a chance to hug her and she hugged everybody, or all I know is suddenly I'm in this woman's arms, right? And I felt like I had just been enfolded by like the divine feminine, like the mother. She carried that energy so strongly. And I didn't have words for it in the moment. All I know is like the wellspring of pain and emotion and feelings that just came pouring out. I just sat in that woman's arms and sobbed, which felt like hours. It was probably a minute, or two, but it was all of these things just started to come to begin to come to focus. And I think there was something about that that it gave me this realization that a shift needed to happen. There was a next level I needed to go, and that everything would be okay, that
Yeah.
I would be held. This was going to be scary. It might be hard. But I could do it,
Yeah.
and in that kind of like powerful holding, all of that came to be. And and the weird thing is like out of that, the concrete thing that came was I needed to do my doctorate. I needed to study this, but in that process of studying it, I was going to immerse myself in, the experience that I had had and that was going to turn me inside out. I didn't know it at the time. I thought it was like, I need to improve my critical thinking and, study this so other women could do it. And I still kind of thought I had done it in a way that
Right.
hadn't come to realize yet. But it's like she gave me the empowerment, that loving strength that I could hold on to. And then when you have an experience like that at those dark or challenging times, or I wanted to quit, or I was so afraid at various junctures through that, I could just go back there. And it was
Right.
like, it was, still, it was as real as I was sitting in her arms.
I wanted you to share that story because in what you had said earlier about creating these small communities and bringing women together. You don't have to have a shamanic blessing. You don't have to be in
No.
Nepal. You can create that mother, that being held in your own
Yes.
community and in your own friendships if you allow it. And by allowing it, I've noticed it's become you have to be vulnerable and share
Oh,
and create that
so
space
true.
for the people in your life.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head, Sabrina. It is. It's in that people always say, like, oh, I broke down, I had a breakdown. It's like, no, you broke open, right? You took the risk to show your vulnerability and
I
be
know,
that. And
but
when
we
you
are
do that in
ingrained to not to.
community,
You
I
remember at dinner when I
know.
started crying and I
You're like,
apologized
I'm sorry. I
immediately.
know, I
And
know.
you're
And I'm
like,
like,
don't do that.
no. No, we got to start giving ourselves permission and celebrating when someone feels safe enough to allow those tears and allow our pain to be visible and to, eh, you know, cheer each other on when we do that, hold each other and, be there, but also, encourage the flow, right?
Yeah.
We really want to encourage that flow with each other. Because don't you like, I think that was what was so magical about that night. Like, we didn't have to spend a lot of time together, and a lot of the women didn't know each other. They only knew one other person, but I feel close to every one of those women.
Amen.
I'm like,
And
oh, I want to like,
100%.
when can we all be together
Yeah,
again?
let's do a part
And it
two.
was,
For everyone listening, I will put the book in the notes as well as Gertrude's Instagram, how to get a hold of her. She does retreats. She's fabulous. And the book is beautiful. I love
it-
the
you
look of
know,
the, I mean, I love the book,
thank you.
but the cover is so beautiful too. So
That really mattered. And that's, one of those feminine values that I was really, was going to, it wasn't ever a fight because Kristen, my publisher, was right with me. And she, I think found the right person came to us, and it came because I said, I I want this, I want people to read the book. I think there's, I tried to put together words that were going to have meaning, and write, but I held it as like it's a transmission. It's going to have energy. I want it to be something that people feel like if it's just sitting out, it gives them pleasure, right?
I mean,
And
look at it, everybody. It's so
no.
it doesn't
Did
it
you
like
see
it's
the inside?
person.
Did
Yeah,
you?
I mean it's so pretty,
No, but
and
the jacket. So if you take away the jacket cover, did you see what's? Yeah, yeah, she did that
it's
for me.
pretty. But I mean,
So it's all
it's so
coated with
beautiful,
the,
and it's
yeah,
pretty on the outside and it's pretty on the inside too.
yeah, yep,
Thank
yeah. I
you,
wanted people to
Gertrude.
judge the book by the cover, right?
Well,
Like I,
this one's going to be a good one. Thank you for being
oh my
here.
gosh, Sabrina, thank you
Such a
for having
pleasure.
me.
Such a
I
pleasure. What a great conversation. Everyone get the book. I promise you, you won't regret it.